My name is Evelyn Parker, and for more than 2 decades I worked at Titan Freight Solutions. Officially, I was a contract and compliance manager. Unofficially, I was the person who made sure thousands of trucks, warehouses, ports, customs brokers, and union representatives kept working together without destroying each other. Most people never think about supply chains. They walk into stores, buy what they need, and assume products magically appear on shelves. They never see the chaos behind the curtain. They never see the delayed ships, labor disputes, fuel shortages, weather disasters, or midnight phone calls. I saw all of it. For 22 years, I was the person everyone called when something went wrong. The company founder, Richard Callaway, understood that. He wasn't easy to work with, but he respected competence. We built a relationship based on trust. I kept freight moving, and he stayed out of my way. The arrangement worked beautifully until he retired and handed control of the company to his son. His son, Brandon Callaway, was everything his father wasn't. He had an expensive MBA, designer suits, perfect hair, and absolutely no understanding of how the business actually operated. He talked constantly about innovation, culture, and transformation. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell the difference between a trucking contract and a parking ticket. During his first few months as CEO, Brandon made change after change. He outsourced departments that worked perfectly fine. He hired consultants who knew nothing about logistics. He created pointless management positions and filled them with people who agreed with him. One of those people was his favorite employee, a social media-obsessed executive named Madison, who spent more time discussing company energy than company operations. I ignored the nonsense as long as I could. I've survived economic crashes, labor strikes, and global emergencies. One arrogant executive wasn't going to scare me. At least that's what I believed. The tension between us grew slowly. Brandon hated that people trusted me. Drivers called me before they called executives. Vendors listened to my advice. Union leaders respected my word. To Brandon, that looked like influence he didn't control. One Tuesday afternoon, I was negotiating a major contract renewal with Gulf Coast shipping representatives. The agreement was worth tens of millions of dollars and would secure critical freight routes for years. While I was handling the negotiation, Brandon walked past my desk. He stopped, glanced at the paperwork covering my workspace, and frowned. "Evelyn, this desk looks terrible," he said. "Investors are visiting next week." I stared at him. "I'm working on the Gulf Coast contract. You should digitize everything. If I stop this negotiation to organize paperwork, we lose the deal." He smiled like I was an elderly relative struggling with technology. "We have software now." Then he walked away. That moment told me everything. Brandon thought software replaced experience. He thought relationships could be automated. He thought people were interchangeable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. A month later, peak shipping season arrived. Every warehouse was overloaded. Every route was packed. Every minute mattered. That's when Brandon sent an email requiring senior staff to attend his birthday celebration at the family estate. Attendance was mandatory. The party happened to fall on the exact weekend. I needed to supervise a sensitive pharmaceutical shipment worth millions of dollars. Missing the shipment wasn't an option. I politely declined. The next morning, my computer access stopped working. Before I could investigate, Brandon appeared with security guards and Madison standing beside him. "We're restructuring leadership," he announced. I already knew where this was going. "You're firing me? We need people aligned with our culture." I almost laughed. After 22 years of service, after saving the company countless times, I was being fired because I skipped a birthday party. I calmly handed over my identification badge. Then I walked out. What Brandon didn't realize was that my departure triggered something buried deep inside hundreds of contracts. Years earlier, during a period of financial uncertainty, I had negotiated protection clauses with major vendors. The language allowed service providers to pause operations whenever key relationship personnel left the company. It wasn't intended as a weapon. It was designed to protect everyone involved. Unfortunately for Brandon, I was the key relationship personnel. Sitting in my SUV outside the building, I opened my personal email account and sent a simple notification. I informed vendors, unions, customs brokers, and transportation partners that I no longer worked for Titan Freight Solutions. I advised them to review their contracts and contact the company's new leadership regarding continuity requirements. That was all. No threats, no sabotage, just facts. Within 30 minutes, my phone started ringing. Union representatives wanted answers. Port authorities wanted clarification. Freight partners wanted confirmation. Every conversation ended the same way. I was gone. The contracts were still active. They needed to decide how to protect themselves. One by one, they suspended services, paused shipments, and initiated compliance reviews. The dominoes started falling. By lunchtime, trucks were sitting idle across multiple states. Customs paperwork stalled. Access credentials expired. Fuel accounts required authorization. Nobody knew how to provide. Brandon called repeatedly. I ignored him. Eventually, he reached me through another number. His confidence was gone. Drivers were stranded. Warehouses couldn't process freight. Executives couldn't access critical systems. He demanded passwords and authentication codes. I reminded him that I no longer worked for the company. Sharing credentials would be illegal. His panic grew stronger with every passing minute. Meanwhile, I sat inside a truck stop diner drinking terrible coffee and watching the situation unfold. For the first time in years, the crisis belonged to someone else. The real disaster arrived later that afternoon. Desperate to keep freight moving, Brandon bypassed established safety procedures and hired an uncertified driver through an emergency freight platform. The driver was assigned to transport hazardous chemicals. Experienced managers would never have approved it. The driver lost control of the vehicle. The truck crashed. Hazardous materials spilled across a major interstate. Federal regulators immediately launched an investigation. The Transportation Department ordered emergency safety reviews. What began as operational chaos became a legal catastrophe. That evening, I received a call from Victor Steele, a senior executive at Titan's largest competitor, Summit Global Logistics. Victor had spent years trying to recruit me. This time I listened. We met at an upscale restaurant overlooking downtown. While executives across the industry watched Titan collapse, Victor presented an offer. He didn't want my resume. He wanted my network. He understood something Brandon never learned. Logistics isn't built on software. It's built on trust. People move freight because they trust the person on the other end of the phone. For 22 years, I had earned that trust. I accepted his proposal on one condition. I would run operations my way. No interference. No corporate games. Victor agreed. While lawyers prepared contracts, the crisis deepened. Titan's customers began searching for alternatives. Vendors migrated. Transportation partners shifted business elsewhere. The market was voting with its feet. And it wasn't choosing Brandon. That night, Richard Calloway returned from Europe after learning his company was collapsing. I met him at a private airport. The moment he saw me, he exploded with anger. He accused me of destroying his legacy. I listened patiently. Then I explained exactly what happened. I told him about the firing, the ignored warnings, the contract clauses, the safety failures, the hazardous materials accident. By the time I finished, His anger had transformed into something worse. Regret. Deep down, he already knew the truth. His son hadn't inherited his judgment. He had inherited his last name. The following day, federal investigators arrived at company headquarters. Internal audits uncovered financial irregularities tied to Brandon and Madison. Money intended for legitimate business purposes had been redirected into personal projects, luxury expenses, and questionable consulting arrangements. The situation rapidly became criminal. Within days, Brandon was removed from leadership. Soon afterward, law enforcement became involved. The empire was collapsing from every direction at once. Richard tried to save it. The board tried to save it. The lawyers tried to save it. None of them could restore what mattered most. Trust. Once trust disappears in logistics, everything else follows. 3 weeks later, Titan Freight Solutions officially agreed to sell its remaining assets. Purchase price: $1. Most people thought the deal was ridiculous. They didn't understand the math. The buyer wasn't purchasing a healthy company. The buyer was accepting lawsuits, liabilities, damaged infrastructure, regulatory scrutiny, and pension obligations. Summit Global Logistics agreed to absorb all of it. In exchange, they inherited the network I spent decades building. More importantly, they protected the employees who had done nothing wrong. The drivers kept their pensions. The warehouse teams kept their jobs. The dispatchers found new positions. The people who actually made the business work survived. That's what mattered to me. A few weeks later, I moved into my new office overlooking the harbor. Massive cargo ships crossed the water below, while cranes loaded containers destined for cities across the country. The operation was larger than anything I had managed before. But for the first time, I had authority equal to my responsibility. No one questioned every decision. No one asked me to attend mandatory birthday parties. No one confused popularity with leadership. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Brandon. He blamed me for everything. He claimed I stole his future. He insisted he was the victim. I read the letter once. Then I fed it into a shredder. The paper disappeared in seconds. So did the last piece of him that occupied space in my mind. Later that day, my phone rang. A cargo vessel was delayed. Several shipments needed rerouting. A dozen people were waiting for answers. I smiled and opened the tracking system. The machine was humming again. The difference was that now I wasn't holding together someone else's empire. I was helping build my own. And after everything that happened, that felt a whole lot better than revenge.